In this video, we're going to be doing a mobile-first web design tutorial, and we're going to have a look at this design by Hachibur from Bangladesh, which he's got a very nice little design here for the mobile with a couple of screens on just being healthy and what you can do during this situation right now. Now, my name's Adrian. I do design and development videos, so if you like this kind of content and you want to see more like it, hit like and subscribe and let's just jump right into it. So this design here was made in Figma, and what we're going to do is we're going to pull out some of the measurements here that we've got on the phone, and we're going to pull this into our design document here, which I've based on just some very basic HTML with nothing really in there. It's just a HTML CSS starter kit. Now what we're going to do is we're going to first get the height and width for this, which is about 480 and 1020, and we're going to put this in as a div called section. Now for this section, we're going to put it in our SCSS and do a height of 1020, a width of 480 pixels, and we'll do a border of 1 pixel solid gray. Let's apply that and make sure it shows up. So that's it over here, and that's good. So what we can do with that now is we can center that. We'll create a new body tag in here for our main body, and we'll do a min height of 100 view height. Then we'll do a display of flex, justify content of center, and an align items of center. So that way this design here is in the center. Let me move my head over a little bit so that you guys can see that a little bit better. From here, we can start developing the design that we have here in Figma. So the first thing we'll do is we'll pull out this nice big design here for the header. And here it is with this person up here. Now, in order to do this, let's go into actually the Figma design doc here. And we'll grab it out. We should be able to select most items here and pull them out as groups. And this is what Figma allows you to do when you're using it. Now here in the header, we've got this image here and we've got some background art. I'm going to see if I can pull this all out as one section, and we'll save this into our HTML document as an SVG or an image. To do that, we're going to select all these items here, and we're going to go to the bottom right here and click export. We're going to export this for the time being as a PNG, and we'll just click export here. This will produce a zip file which we'll be able to access with our items in here. And right now they're all separate, so I might have to convert these into a group in Photoshop. The other thing we could do is we could just group them all by selecting them all and clicking group selection. Now, as a group, we can select export and we can export them as a PNG. And this way we'll only get a single image, and this is much more useful when we're trying to design for the web, because trying to combine all the elements together can be a little bit annoying. So let's drag and drop this into our design doc over here into the folder, and we can start using this now. Let's rename this to something more specific, such as header image. And in here, we can create the very first section, which we can call header. And in our header, we'll add this image in, which is just header image.png with an alt tag saying header. If we apply that and have a look at our design doc, we can see it's in there. Of course, the design isn't exactly the same yet as our Figma design. So in order to do that, we're going to have to do a couple of changes. First, let's make sure that the width is 100%. There we go. Next, we'll want to add a little bit of padding to the header. So let's do a padding of maybe about 30 pixels. That looks about right. And then finally, we'll want to make sure that we have this header icon there at the very top. And this also looks like an SVG with a couple of shapes, so we can pull that across as well. But before we do that, let's double check everything is looking correct. So in terms of the height, there is a little bit of padding extra from the top. It's about 30 to 60 pixels, I think. Let's have a look. It's about 45 pixels. So for the header section, we'll just do padding top 45 pixels. Great. With that done, our design is looking a little bit better now. If you have a look at this PNG, you can see that it doesn't scale very well. So in that case, what we could do is we could export this group here as an SVG. And by doing it as an SVG, we'll find that it'll keep its styling and it won't lose its crispness. Doesn't matter how far you export it, and increase its size. So let's try an SVG this time instead. I'm going to put this in here and I'm going to drag and drop it, rename it to header image.svg, and it's missing something in there. What's it missing? Well, it looks fine here. So let's put this into our document and replace the header image here with an SVG. So now if you take a look at it, you can see that it's keeping its consistency for its scaling. So that looks a lot better. Next, let's have a look at this menu item up here. Now this looks like where you would click to grab a menu. And this just is a simple border radius with a small icon up here. So let's export this icon and we can use this in our design. Let's do a PNG. We'll do an SVG again. And let's export that and put that into our design doc, which is over here. We'll put this in, and then in our design doc, we can call it. We'll create a new div here called menu. And for this menu, we'll import the image. It doesn't seem to have come across yet. Let's double check that. Group 27, drag and drop. There we go. And we'll call this menu.svg. So we'll call it in here, menu.svg, with an alt tab of menu, and we can do a width of maybe something small like 45 pixels. If we save that and have a look at our design doc, there's our menu, but it's missing the background. So to add the background, we'll just pull out the color here, which is this F7 color, and we'll create it here in the menu. So let's go here, create a new class called menu. And for this class, we'll do a display of inline dash block, and we'll do a background of that hex color F7, F7, F7. Now it still needs to be a little bit bigger, so let's add padding of maybe 0.5 EM, and maybe a display of flex, justify content of center, and align items of center as well. That'll make sure that it's right in the middle of where we need it to be. So because we did an inline block, we'll do an inline flex this time. Let's do justify items, sorry, align items, center. Great. Now lastly, we want to do some border radius on this. And that's quite a lot there. It's about 15 pixels, so that's looking a little bit better. It doesn't look like it's exactly centered. So if we inspect the element here and take a look at it, let's move this over. We can see that the image is actually off center, which is why essentially it looks like the padding isn't taking effect properly. Now we can fix this by using Illustrator, or we could, for example, make the image a little bit smaller and add the padding at the top and at the bottom a little bit more or less. So let's try that. Let's do padding top 1 EM and padding right 1 EM. So now it's a little bit more centered. If we take a look at the design, we can see that it's getting a little bit closer there to what we want it to be. Now, let's also add a nice border radius to the section there. I think the border radius on that is about 30 pixels, more or less. So that's looking a little bit better now. We can have a look at this next section now, which has some large buttons to things like find a doctor, view some videos, or some news. So let's create this section now. Now to create this section, it's all in a big background gradient of that F7, F7, F7. So let's create that first. In here, we'll create a new section called main. And for this main, let's put this into our CSS. I'm going to put it right in here. And I'm going to do a background of that gray color and a border top right radius of about 30 pixels, I think it was. and a border top left radius of about 30 pixels. Let's do a min height of 100 pixels just so you guys can see that. And if we have a look, we can see we have a little bit of padding or margin there between the image and this section here. So what we'll need to do for the header is we'll need to remove the padding from the bottom. So let's do that here. Padding bottom 0 pixels. Great. So now that's fitting in straight to the bottom there. And in terms of our design, we can now make these buttons here. But before we do, we need to make sure this whole section is scrollable. So to do that, we'll do overflow -y, and we'll do that as scroll. Now, right now, we don't actually have anything specific there, so we'll only do the scroll on hover. Otherwise, the scroll will be hidden. So that should look a lot better. So now when we mouse over it, we'll be able to scroll. Now, let's have a look at how we're going to design these buttons over here. There's a few different ways we could do that. We could do that as a flex or a grid. In this case, I might just do a flex because that'll be nice and easy and we can get a consistent look and feel for them. So to do that, we'll have a look at the size, and they're about 105 by 110 pixels. What we're mainly concerned about here is the height, which is 110 pixels, because everything else will sort of essentially be set by the flex with a flex of 1. So what we'll do is we'll jump in here. And for the main content, we'll do this as a class called buttons. And in here, we'll pass in button. And for each button, what we have is we've got a nice little logo there, which we can pull out as an SVG. So let's export that. We'll export the group here, and here we'll call this as doctors. We'll copy over this into our document. And that'll just copy over there, and let's rename this to doctor. And then in our design doc, we'll call it in here, doctor.svg, with an alt tag of doctor and a width of maybe something like 50 pixels. So it should show up any second now. I haven't spelled doctor correctly, so let me fix that up. There we go. Let's refresh that. So there it is. It could probably be a little bit bigger, maybe 125 pixels, or we could even do 100% for the time being. Now we'll create a couple more buttons in here. And for each one of these buttons, what we'll do is for the parent class, which is buttons, we'll do a display of flex. Then for each button as a child, we'll do a flex of 1. We'll also do a height of, I think it was about 110 pixels. Let me double check. Yes, that was 110 pixels. Great. And then finally, for each button, we'll do a padding of maybe something like 15 pixels and a border radius of about 10 pixels. They also all have a background of white, and they also have about a margin of 5 pixels. So that's it. And then finally for the buttons itself, it also has a margin or a padding of about 10 pixels. So there are those buttons. With those SVGs, they're not quite correct. They're getting a little bit too tall. So we're going to actually change their height and width here. What we'll do is for the height and width, let's just do 66% for the time being. And they should fit in there just nice and neatly. And then for the actual buttons, we'll change them to be display flex. We'll justify the content to center and align the items to center as well. We'll also do a flex direction of column, just so that the next item which I add in, which is the title here, like find doctor, will essentially be under the actual icon. So we'll have find doctor. Here we have video clips. Video clips. And the next section will be radio news. So let's add that in as well. Great. So those are looking a little bit better now. What we can do as well is we can pull out these icons here. So for each one of those, I'm just going to hit export. and export them as SVGs. And this one here as well for the radio. Each time you want to get into a group, you just have to double click and that gets you into that group in Figma. So I've got the two here. Let's pull this into our design doc. So this one here is a clip. So let's move that over and rename it to clip. And this next one here is radio. So let's rename that as well. Here we go, radio. Great. Let's update our design doc here. And for each one of these, we'll do clip here and radio there. So that's starting to look a little bit better. Next, we'll want to do the next series of buttons. So we can literally copy and paste these across. I'm going to copy this whole row of buttons and create it again. Now, the only difference I'm going to do is I'm going to do a padding bottom of 0 pixels. And a padding top of 0 pixels. So that looks a little bit better. Now for the section, which is the main section here, we'll do a padding top of 10 pixels and that should clean it up a little bit more. So that's looking a little bit better now. What we'll do is let's create those icons for the next section. So we'll just export these from here. We'll go Figma export SVG. So this is TV. Let's pull this in. Is that going over or not? There we go. Let's rename that to TV. And then we've got books here. So let's export that as well. We'll copy it over and rename it. And here we'll just call it book. And the last one here is shopping. So let's export that as well. Now I've forgotten to hit SVG there, but there we go. And here it is, and let's drag and drop that into our folder as well. We'll just call this maybe shop. There we go. Shop. Great, with that done, we can put the labels in here. So let's copy TV across in here. The next one was ebooks. The next one was shopping. And in here, we'll just do TV, book, and shop. Great. So that section is now done. We can have a look at the hospital availability section here. Now, this is just under our buttons. So we could just create a new class in here called hospitals. And in here, the next thing we can do is create a hospital. Now for the hospital section, what we want to do is have this title here saying hospital availability. So we'll do that as a H2 tag. And what we'll do is in here, we'll create a new class called hospitals for our CSS. And for the H2 tag, what we'll do is we'll make it a little bit smaller, maybe a font of 2 rem, maybe 1.5 rem. So that's a little bit more consistent with the design doc. It's a little bit more bold as well. So let's put that in, and the color is not exactly black. It's a little bit off black. So here we've got the hex color for that. And let's do font weight, maybe 500. So that looks a little bit better. We also need to add some padding in there. So let's do a padding of about 10 pixels, I think maybe, or I think it was about 15. So that's a little bit better. And now we can do a hospital class. And in here, we want a white color. And what we're going to do is we're going to have two sections. We're going to have the logo here on the left and some information here on the right. So let's create the divs for that. Here we'll do logo, and we'll have an image in here. And here we'll have info. And for the info, we have the title, the location, and the amount of beds. So let's do title, location, and beds. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a display of flex in here. Then what we're going to do is grab the icon that we have here for the hospitals, And this is just a generic icon, but I'm going to pull out the whole group because that'll be a little bit easier for us. So let's group these two and let's export them as an SVG. In this case, I might export a PNG. So let's do that here. And this would be probably the logo of the hospital. But in this case, it's just a placeholder. So I'm just going to call this hospital placeholder. There it is. I'm going to copy over that text and put that into our code over here. Now for the hospital, it also has a background of white and a padding of about 10 pixels. Border radius of also about 10 pixels. So that's it there. Now it actually has a bit more padding, so let's add that in, maybe 15 pixels. Now we've got the title here, which has a font size of 20, location, and available beds. So for that, let's put these in here. We'll do title, location, and beds. Now for the beds, we've got a color here, which is a purple. Let's put that in. For the location, it's an off gray. This here is the hex value, so let's put that in here. And for the title, it's quite bold, so let's update that as well. Font weight bold. So we can copy over the variables now of these. So we'll put here the name of the hospital, here the location, and in here the amount of beds they have. So that's looking a little bit better, but our image isn't working very well. So let's fix that up. We'll do a width of 100%, and that's fixing out the size of the image, but it's probably not in the location we want it to be. So what we're going to do is we'll do an info in here, and this will be a flex of 1. This will make sure that we're utilizing that full column there. But we also have another one in here called logo. And for that, we want to do a display of flex, justify content. Where's that gone? Display of flex, justify content of center, and align items of center as well. So that's looking a little bit better. We'll also add a padding right of maybe 15 pixels. So now we've got that hospital icon with the name of the hospital, its location, and its amount of beds. That's looking really good. Finally, let's add one more hospital in there or two and see how that looks. What we can do now is we can just copy over this entire hospital object. Let's copy that across. And what we'll need to do is we'll need to add a margin bottom to it. Let's do margin bottom of, say, 10 pixels. Let's double check our design. So yeah, that's about 10 pixels. We'll also need to make sure that there is a bit more padding there under the title. So we'll do a margin bottom of 10 pixels here, maybe 20. So that's a little bit more consistent with our design. It also has a little bit more margin on the top there. So in here, let's do a padding top of 30 pixels. So that's a little bit better. And finally, we need a different color for the next set of hospitals. So in this case, it's this orange color. So let's copy over the text to start off with. And in here, we'll update that. And the available beds as well. And its location too. There we go. And what we'll do is, in order to have a different color in here, we'll do Alt. And what we can do then is we can create an and Alt in here. When we do that, we can have a different image, a different color for the info beds section. So let's have a look. Right now, beds is this color, but in our design, we want it to be this orange color. So let's pull that out and apply it in here. Next, we also need to change the logo. So let's grab this logo in here and we'll export that. Let's make sure it's grouped. When we hit export, let's pull this out and we'll pull this into our doco here. And in this case, rather than calling it hospital placeholder 1, we'll call it hospital placeholder 2. So let's copy over this text here and rename it. Where did that go? Here it is. And let's change that to the number 2. Great. So now in our design, what we can do is just change this to the number 2. And there we go. So now we've got our design more or less done. It's also got a couple of other very subtle things that you guys might not have noticed, such as these boxes here have a drop shadow of 20 pixels and they're very, very light gray. So let's apply that. Let's go up here to the buttons and here they are, and we'll do box shadow. And I think it was 2 pixels, 0 pixels, 20 pixels, and it was that color there. Let's apply that. Now that's looking much darker than I thought it should. So let's double check what it is. It might have a slight opacity on there. So I'm just gonna double check that one. Here, the opacity is 16%. So what we'll do here is we'll go RGBA, pass in the color, and we'll do that 20%. I think it was 20%, or was it? 16%, sorry. 16%. Or maybe 0.16. So now it's got that very, very subtle box shadow. We'll also do that to the hospital item as well. So that's looking a lot better. We can also copy across a few more hospitals, for example, and that way we can actually show what it looks like with a scroll effect. So there we go. And this is our responsive app design. It is for mobile first, and hopefully it gives you an idea of what it's like to build mobile first. If we wanted to change this now and we wanted to make a desktop version, we would have to remove this width and height that we're setting over here. And when we do that, then we'd probably have a very different design. But for the time being, this hopefully should give you an idea of what it's like to build a mobile first design. I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit like and subscribe. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.